Hey, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be tackling something that's been getting a lot of attention lately, inclusive education. You know, that idea that we need to be making schools work for absolutely everyone.
Right.
And, you might be here listening because you're prepping for a big meeting, or maybe you're trying to catch up on the latest trends in education, or maybe you're just curious about how we can build a more inclusive world in general.
Yeah,
But whatever brought you here, we're going to unpack it all together.
absolutely.
We've got some excerpts from this academic text. It's called Inclusiveness Chapter 2.
Okay.
And we're going to pull out all the good stuff. You know, the things that make you think, I
Yeah,
never thought about it that way before.
I love that.
So get ready. We're about to take a trip through all the different ways that schools have tried to teach everyone. And we're going to go from keeping students totally separate to bringing them all together. And the whole journey, it actually starts with a pretty simple question. Is being treated equally always the same as being treated fairly?
That is a great place to start. It might seem obvious at first,
Right?
but when you start to think about it, all of the different ways that students can be different, how their needs and the challenges they face can be completely unique,
Yeah.
well, that's when things get really interesting.
Right. And speaking of interesting, the text jumps right into defining inclusion. That idea of making everyone feel valued and respected no matter what their differences are.
Absolutely.
But then it gets even more specific and talks about inclusive education.
And that's where it gets really powerful.
Okay.
Because inclusive education, it takes that big, broad idea of inclusion and says, okay, how do we actually apply that to schools?
Yeah.
It's saying that every student, regardless of what their needs are, should have the opportunity to learn and thrive in a regular classroom.
It's like saying, hey, the classroom door is open to everyone, and we're going to make sure that you have the support you need to succeed once you're inside.
Exactly. And what I have found fascinating is that the text it goes even deeper, and it traces the roots of this whole idea back to three core concepts.
Oh, okay. So what are those?
All right, so it all starts with this idea that education is a basic human right, not a privilege.
Okay.
And then you've got this idea that quality education, it actually flourishes when you have all sorts of different learners in the mix.
Okay.
And then finally, it really challenges us to think about how the lines between learners with and without disabilities can be blurry.
Oh, interesting.
It's not always so clear cut.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
It's not about labeling or separating. It's about recognizing that everyone has their own strengths and their own challenges, right?
and here's the kicker. This whole inclusive education thing, it's not just some isolated idea.
Right.
The text actually connects it to something much bigger, the UN's Sustainable Development Goals.
Specifically, goal number 4, quality education.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's all about creating a world where everyone everywhere has the chance to reach their full potential.
Yeah.
So inclusive education becomes this really key part of building a better future, not just for students, but for everyone.
Okay, so we've got this big picture now. How does the text break down the nuts and bolts of inclusion? How do we actually make this happen?
Well, it presents this really cool framework, 3 main pillars that it calls learners' education systems and diversity and discrimination.
Okay.
So imagine them like the legs of a tripod.
Okay.
Each one is totally crucial for holding up the whole structure of inclusive education.
Love a good visual.
Right.
Okay, so starting with learners, what's the key takeaway there?
The text, it really hammers home this idea that everyone has the right to education,
Oh.
not just kids who fit a certain mold.
Mm-hmm.
And it emphasizes that learning, it's a lifelong process.
Oh, for sure.
And get this, everyone can learn,
Yeah.
even if they face, different hurdles along the way. It's like saying, look, learning isn't one size fits all. We all learn in different ways at different paces, and that's okay.
Exactly. And that leads perfectly into the second pillar, education systems.
Okay.
It argues that schools need to be flexible and welcoming environments that can adapt to students' needs,
Okay.
not the other way around.
So it's not about forcing every student into the same box.
Right.
It's about building a system that can flex and bend to support them.
That's it. And a big part of that is promoting school improvement and collaboration.
Okay.
So we're talking about teachers working with administrators, working with parents,
Yeah?
even working with the entire community,
Wow.
all coming together to create a learning environment that works for everyone.
It takes a village, as they say.
It does.
And speaking of the whole community, that brings us to the third pillar, diversity and discrimination.
Yes,
This one seems to go way beyond the classroom.
absolutely. This pillar gets to the heart of why inclusion matters.
Okay.
It's about actively combating exclusion in all its forms. It's about seeing diversity as a strength.
Hmm.
And it's about preparing students for a world that values those differences.
So it's about building a society where everyone feels like they belong, like they have a voice, like they matter.
Exactly.
But okay, enough theory, right? How do we actually put all of this into practice?
Well, the text dives into that too, and it highlights two key aspects: processes and resources.
Okay.
And it starts by acknowledging the elephant in the room,
Hmm.
the barriers that prevent full participation.
So you mean like physical barriers in schools, or are we talking about something else?
It's actually much broader than that.
Okay,
It could be anything from societal attitudes and misconceptions about disability
Oh, okay.
to a lack of resources or inadequate teacher training.
So there are these real-world obstacles
Yeah.
that we need to identify and overcome, but how do we do that?
Well, the text suggests a few ways: increasing collaboration using more participatory methods, and get this, seeing people as key resources.
Okay.
It's like saying, hey, everyone has something to contribute. Parents, teachers, community members all bring unique knowledge and skills to the table.
I love that it's about tapping into the collective wisdom of the community.
Exactly.
What about actual resources, though, like funding and materials?
Well, that's where this concept of cost effectiveness comes in.
Okay.
The text argues that using local resources within schools and communities can be a powerful way to make the most of limited budgets.
So it's about being resourceful, creative thinking outside the box?
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about the big picture of inclusion, the 3 pillars, and the importance of identifying barriers and leveraging resources, but how does all of this translate into action?
Well, the text gets specific by highlighting 4 major principles of inclusion that are outlined by UNESCO.
Okay.
And they're all about turning those big ideas into practical steps.
Okay, I'm right. Hit me with those principles.
Okay, so the first one is inclusion is a process. It's not a destination. It's a journey of constant learning and growth. It's a journey that requires us to constantly, question our assumptions and adapt our approaches and really strive to create a more welcoming and equitable environment for everyone.
Yeah, I'm starting to see a pattern here, this whole idea of inclusion being a process.
Right.
It's like weaving a tapestry, right? It's not about finding that one perfect thread. It's about constantly adding new threads, adjusting the pattern, and making sure all those colors blend together harmoniously.
That is a beautiful analogy.
Mhm.
And it really highlights the interconnectedness of all these principles.
Yeah.
For example, the second principle focuses on identifying and removing barriers.
Okay.
It challenges us to actively seek out and dismantle those obstacles that prevent full participation.
So it's not enough to just say, hey, everyone's welcome. We have to actually do the work of making sure the environment is truly accessible and supportive for everyone.
Right. It's about being proactive, not reactive.
Yeah.
And that leads perfectly into the third principle: presence, participation, and achievement for all. This one emphasizes that inclusion is about more than just being physically present in a classroom or a workplace.
Right. It's about being fully engaged, having a voice, and having the opportunity to truly succeed.
Exactly. It's about creating a culture where everyone feels like they belong, where they can contribute their unique talents and perspectives, and where their achievements are celebrated.
And that brings us to the fourth and final principle, which focuses specifically on those at risk of marginalization.
Yes.
This one seems especially important in today's world.
It is.
Yeah.
It calls for paying special attention to the needs of those who are most likely to be excluded or left behind.
Mm-hmm.
It's about recognizing that some groups face greater challenges and systemic barriers. And it's our responsibility to create a system that actively addresses those inequities.
So it's about making sure that everyone has a fair shot regardless of their background or their circumstances. It's about leveling the playing field so that everyone can reach their full potential.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the text goes on to break down these broad principles into more specific examples like respecting diversity, ensuring equal opportunity, providing individualized support, fostering collaboration, promoting accessibility, and embracing flexibility in teaching.
You know, it's funny, when you list it out like that, it sounds almost deceptively simple.
Right.
Like, oh yeah, of course we should do all those things.
Right.
But the reality is putting these principles into action can be incredibly complex.
That is true.
Yeah.
It requires a shift in mindset, a willingness to challenge the status quo, and a commitment to ongoing learning and growth.
Yeah.
And the text is very honest about the fact that practice often falls short of policy.
Mm-hmm.
You have a lot of work to do.
Okay, so let's talk about the why. Why does inclusive education matter so much?
Yeah,
The text dives into this from a few different angles, right?
it does. And the first one it tackles is the educational foundation.
Okay.
It highlights research findings that show students in inclusive settings actually perform better academically, psychologically, and socially.
Hold on, seriously. So it's not just about being nice or doing the right thing. There's actual evidence that inclusive education benefits all students.
That's right. It's a win-win situation.
Wow.
When students with diverse needs and abilities learn together, everyone benefits.
Okay.
And not only that, the text points out that inclusive education is also economically beneficial, both for individuals and society as a whole.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me more about these economic benefits.
Well, think about it. When more people have access to quality education, they're more likely to find meaningful employment, contribute to the economy, and break cycles of poverty.
Yeah.
The text specifically mentions things like reduced dropout and repetition rates, cost effectiveness compared to special schools, and increased employment opportunities for people with disabilities.
So it's not just an educational imperative, it's an economic one too.
Exactly.
Makes sense. Investing in inclusive education is investing in the future workforce.
Exactly. And then the text shifts gears and dives into the social foundation of inclusion, making a powerful argument against segregation. It highlights that separating students based on perceived differences actually breeds fear and prejudice.
It's like saying if we don't learn to live and learn together from a young age, how can we expect to build a truly inclusive society?
Right. It's about creating a society where everyone feels like they belong, where differences are celebrated, and where people can connect with each other on a deeper level.
Yeah, I love that. But the text also touches on the legal foundation of inclusion, which makes this even more powerful.
It does.
Yeah.
It reminds us that the right to learn and live together without discrimination based on disability is not just a nice idea. It's a fundamental human right enshrined in international law.
So inclusive education is not just about doing the right thing. It's about upholding the law and ensuring that everyone has equal opportunities to learn and thrive.
Absolutely. Now let's be specific.
Okay.
Who exactly benefits from inclusive education and how?
You mean besides everyone in the long run?
Right.
Yeah, the text breaks it down by stakeholder, right?
It does. And it's fascinating to see how the benefits ripple outward. For students with special needs, the text lists advantages, like having peer role models, improving social skills, making friends, and enhancing their learning and skill acquisition.
It's like saying, hey, we all learn best when we're surrounded by people who are different from us.
Yes.
It helps us broaden our perspectives, develop empathy, and understand the world in new ways.
And guess what? The benefits extend to students without special needs as well.
Really?
The text highlights their increased empathy tolerance and a deeper understanding of human diversity as key outcomes.
So it's not just about helping students with disabilities catch up or fit in.
Nope.
It's about creating a richer learning environment for everyone involved.
Exactly. And let's not forget about the teachers.
Oh, yeah, the teachers.
They see rewards too.
Okay, how so?
Increased job satisfaction, the opportunity to learn new teaching methods, and a more positive attitude towards diversity are all mentioned in the text.
It's like saying, hey, teachers, you're not alone in this. We're going to give you the support and the training you need to create inclusive classrooms and watch your students thrive.
And when teachers feel supported and empowered, that positive energy spreads to the entire school community,
Oh, wow.
including the parents.
Right. The text points out that parents of students with disabilities often feel more involved in their children's education,
Yes.
valued as partners, and witness their children thriving in inclusive settings.
Yes.
It creates a sense of shared ownership and responsibility.
And on a broader scale, inclusive education benefits society as a whole.
Okay.
The text talks about promoting social cohesion, reducing prejudice and stigma, ensuring equal opportunities for everyone, and fostering a more diverse and inclusive workforce.
So it's not just about individual students or even individual schools. It's about building a more just equitable and inclusive society for everyone.
Precisely. But let's be realistic.
Okay.
The path to inclusive education is not without its bumps.
Right.
The text acknowledges that there are significant challenges and barriers that we need to address.
Right. It's one thing to talk about the ideals of inclusion, but it's another thing to actually put those ideals into practice.
Right.
So what are some of the biggest obstacles that the text highlights?
Well, it starts by pointing to societal values and beliefs.
Okay.
Sometimes deeply ingrained attitudes and misconceptions about disability can hinder progress towards inclusion.
You mean like the idea that people with disabilities are somehow less than or incapable of contributing to society?
Unfortunately, those beliefs still exist,
Wow.
and they can lead to resistance to inclusive practices
Yeah.
with some people arguing that students with disabilities are better off in segregated settings,
Oh, wow.
or that inclusion will lower academic standards for all students.
It's heartbreaking that those myths persist,
Yeah.
but the text also mentions economic factors, right?
Right.
Like, even if we have the best intentions, sometimes resources are just stretched too thin.
That's a huge barrier.
Yeah.
When schools and communities lack adequate funding, it's incredibly difficult to provide the necessary support for inclusive education.
Yeah.
The text specifically mentions poverty as a major obstacle.
So it's a vicious cycle. Poverty limits access to quality education, which in turn perpetuates poverty. It's like we need to break that cycle somehow.
We do. And the text offers some potential solutions.
Okay.
For example, it highlights the need for increased government funding for inclusive education, as well as community partnerships, and innovative approaches to resource allocation.
It's about finding creative ways to make the most of what we have and advocating for systemic change to ensure that every student has the opportunity to succeed.
Absolutely. And then there are the more practical challenges, like a lack of adequate teacher training.
You know, that makes a lot of sense. We can't expect teachers to magically become experts in inclusive education overnight.
Right.
They need proper training and support to feel confident and prepared to meet the needs of all their students.
Exactly. The text emphasizes that many teachers simply don't receive the preparation they need to effectively teach in inclusive classrooms. They might not have the knowledge or skills to differentiate and manage diverse learning needs or adapt their teaching styles to accommodate different learning styles.
And if teachers are feeling overwhelmed or unprepared, that's going to create a ripple effect throughout the entire classroom.
It will.
Yeah.
And it can lead to frustration, burnout, and a sense that inclusion is just too hard to implement.
Oh, wow.
But the good news is that this is a solvable problem.
Okay.
Investing in high-quality teacher training, providing ongoing professional development opportunities, and creating supportive mentorship programs can make a huge difference.
It's about empowering teachers with the tools and resources they need to succeed so they can in turn empower their students.
That's the goal. And the text also points to the need for more flexible and adaptable curricula.
Okay.
You know, many traditional curricula are designed for a narrow range of learners and don't take into account the diverse learning style strengths and challenges that students bring to the classroom.
It's like trying to fit square pegs into round holes. We need to move away from that one-size-fits-all model and create learning experiences that are tailored to individual needs and interests.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that includes creating accessible environments.
Okay.
The text highlights that many schools and classrooms are simply not designed to accommodate the needs of students with disabilities.
You mean like physical barriers such as stairs or narrow doorways that make it difficult for students with mobility impairments to navigate the school?
Exactly. But accessibility goes beyond just the physical environment.
Okay.
It also includes things like providing assistive technology for students with visual or auditory impairments, making sure that instructional materials are available in alternative formats, and creating a classroom culture that is welcoming and inclusive for all students.
So it's about thinking holistically and considering all the potential barriers that students might face, both visible and invisible.
Right. And it's about being proactive in removing those barriers rather than waiting for students to ask for help.
I like that.
And speaking of barriers, the text also mentions the challenge of large class sizes.
Oh yeah, that's a big one. I can imagine that it's incredibly difficult for teachers to provide individualized attention and support when they have 30 or 40 students in a class.
It is.
Yeah.
And when teachers are stretched too thin, it's often the students with the greatest needs who fall through the cracks.
That's true.
So reducing class sizes is essential for creating more inclusive and supportive learning environments.
Yeah. And how do we do that?
Well, the text suggests some strategies for achieving that, such as advocating for increased funding for education, implementing innovative staffing models, and exploring alternative learning environments like small group instruction or individualized learning plans.
It's about being creative and finding solutions that work for everyone.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about the many challenges of implementing inclusive education. But despite these obstacles, the text ends this section on a hopeful note.
It does. And that's important because it's easy to get bogged down in the negativity and feel like change is impossible. But the text reminds us that there are many opportunities for positive change, and it calls on all stakeholders to work together to create a more inclusive world.
So let's shift gears and focus on some of those opportunities.
Okay.
What are some of the most promising avenues for progress that the text highlights?
Well, it starts by emphasizing the importance of legislation and policy frameworks.
Okay.
When governments enact laws and policies that support inclusion, it creates a foundation for systemic change.
So it's not enough to just rely on the goodwill of individuals or the efforts of individual schools. We
Right.
need strong laws and policies that mandate inclusive practices and hold institutions accountable.
Exactly. And the text provides some great examples,
Oh, like what?
like laws that mandate accessibility in public spaces or policies that require schools to provide accommodations for students with disabilities.
Yeah.
These types of systemic changes can make a huge difference in the lives of people with disabilities.
It's about creating a level playing field and ensuring that everyone has equal opportunities to participate in society.
Right. And the text also highlights the crucial role of advocacy groups and civic societies in pushing for progress.
Mm-hmm.
These groups can raise awareness about disability rights, lobby for legislative change, challenge discriminatory practices, and provide support for individuals and families who are navigating the complexities of the education system.
They're like the watchdogs,
Yes,
making sure that the rights of people with disabilities are protected and that the promise of inclusion is fulfilled.
exactly. And let's not forget about the power of education itself.
Okay.
The text emphasizes the importance of investing in teacher training, both at the pre-service and in-service levels.
Makes sense. If we want to create inclusive classrooms, we need to equip teachers with the knowledge, the skills, and the resources they need to meet the needs of all learners.
Right, and that includes providing teachers with professional development opportunities on topics like differentiated instruction, universal design for learning assistive technology, and culturally responsive teaching.
Yeah.
It's about empowering teachers to create welcoming and supportive learning environments for every student.
And that empowerment, it ripples outward, right? From the teacher to the students to the entire school community.
It does. And technology can play a powerful role in supporting inclusion as well.
How so?
The text highlights the potential of assistive technology,
Right.
such as screen readers, speech-to-text software, and alternative keyboards to help students with disabilities access the curriculum and participate more fully in the learning process.
So it's about using technology to remove barriers and unlock possibilities for all learners.
And let's not forget about the potential of online learning platforms to provide flexible and individualized learning opportunities that can meet the needs of a wide range of students.
Yeah, it's about making learning accessible anytime, anywhere, and in a way that works best for each individual student.
Exactly. And the text also stresses the importance of creating school-based awareness programs that educate students, staff, and families about disability inclusion and diversity.
You mean like assemblies, workshops, guest speakers, that kind of thing?
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's about creating a school culture where everyone feels comfortable talking about these issues and where differences are celebrated rather than feared.
Right. It's about fostering a sense of belonging and creating a community where everyone feels valued and respected.
And it's not just about one-time events, right?
Yeah.
It's about creating an ongoing dialogue and embedding these values into the fabric of the school culture.
Exactly. And that brings us to the final opportunity for positive change that the text highlights: continuous professional development for educators.
You mean making sure that teachers have ongoing opportunities to learn and grow throughout their careers?
That's it. Learning is a lifelong journey, and teachers need to stay up to date on the latest research, best practices, and innovative approaches in inclusive education.
It's about creating a culture of continuous improvement, where teachers are constantly reflecting on their practice, seeking out new knowledge, and collaborating with colleagues to share ideas and learn from each other.
And the text suggests some specific ways to achieve that,
Oh, like what?
such as attending conferences, taking courses, participating in mentorship programs, and engaging in peer-to-peer learning communities.
It's about creating a system where teachers feel supported, valued, and empowered to continuously improve their skills and knowledge.
Right. And when teachers are empowered, everyone benefits: the students, the school community, and society as a whole.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the benefits of inclusive education, the challenges we face, and the opportunities for positive change. But now let's dive into the nitty-gritty of actually creating those inclusive environments.
That's where the rubber meets the road. It's about taking all those big ideas and translating them into concrete actions.
So how do we do that? What does an inclusive environment actually look like?
Well, the text emphasizes that these environments should adapt to individual needs,
Okay.
not the other way around.
Okay.
It's a shift in perspective from a one-size-fits-all approach to a more personalized and flexible model.
It's about recognizing that every student is unique and deserves to have their individual needs met.
Exactly. And it starts with embracing diversity, recognizing that everyone has something unique to offer and valuing those differences.
It's about creating a culture where everyone feels like they belong, regardless of their background, their abilities, or their identity.
Right. And the text lists several key characteristics of inclusive environments.
Okay.
I want to explore those.
Absolutely. Let's break it down.
Okay, so let's paint a picture of what these inclusive environments actually look and feel like.
Yeah.
The text lays out some key ingredients, and honestly, they're all about creating a space where everyone feels like they truly belong.
So it's more than just wheelchair ramps and large print handouts. We're talking about that deeper sense of belonging.
You got it. It's about fostering a climate of respect where people feel safe to be themselves, to express their opinions, to take risks without the fear of being judged or ridiculed. Imagine a classroom where differences are seen as strengths, not weaknesses.
You know, you often hear people say, treat everyone equally, but
Right.
the text seems to be pushing for something beyond just equality.
Exactly. It's about equity. It's about recognizing that we all start from different places. We all have different needs. And sometimes true fairness means providing different levels of support to ensure everyone has a chance to succeed.
So it's like that old saying, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime.
Right.
But maybe in an inclusive environment, it's more like recognize that some people need fishing rods, some need boats, and some might need a whole different set of tools to catch their fish.
I love that. It's about recognizing those different needs and providing the right tools and support to help everyone thrive. And that brings us to another key characteristic of inclusive environments: supportive learning spaces.
Okay, I'm imagining comfy chairs, beanbag cushions, and maybe a hot chocolate station.
Well, those could be nice additions,
Yeah.
but it's really about creating spaces that are accessible on multiple levels, physically, emotionally, and academically. Think about classrooms that are free from physical barriers, where students feel comfortable asking questions, where mistakes are seen as opportunities for growth.
It's about creating that safe space where everyone feels empowered to learn and grow without the fear of judgment.
Exactly. And speaking of empowerment, the text highlights collaboration as a crucial element of inclusive environments. It's about moving away from that competitive every student for themselves mentality and fostering a spirit of teamwork and mutual support.
So instead of seeing classmates as rivals, they see them as allies, as partners in the learning journey.
That's the idea. It's about recognizing that we can achieve more when we work together, share our ideas, and support each other's success. And this collaborative spirit extends beyond the classroom. It involves teachers working with parents, administrators, and community members to create a truly inclusive learning ecosystem.
Okay, so collaboration is key. What else makes these environments truly inclusive?
Well, this one might seem obvious, but it's often overlooked. Having clear, non-discriminatory policies. It's about establishing rules and procedures that protect everyone from unfair treatment based on their race, gender, religion, disability, or any other protected characteristic.
It's about saying, look, in this space, everyone is treated with dignity and respect, period.
Right. It's about creating a culture of equity and fairness, where everyone feels safe, valued, and respected.
So we've got belonging, equity, supportive spaces, collaboration, and non-discrimination. That sounds like a pretty solid foundation for an inclusive environment.
It is. But here's the thing. Creating these environments isn't a one-time project. It's an ongoing process.
Okay.
It's not about checking boxes or achieving some sort of inclusion certification. It's about constantly reflecting, adapting, and challenging our own biases and assumptions.
It sounds like a journey, not a destination.
Exactly. And it's a journey that requires a willingness to learn to grow and to make adjustments along the way. It might feel messy at times, there might be setbacks, but the rewards are immeasurable.
Because ultimately, when we create truly inclusive environments, we unlock the potential of every individual, and that benefits everyone in the long run.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
And speaking of the long run, remember that question we posed at the beginning? Is equality always fair?
Oh, yeah. That's a good one to circle back to. I feel like this whole discussion has given me a new perspective on that question.
Me too. You know, at first glance, it seems like treating everyone the same is the fairest approach. But what we've learned about inclusive education shows that true fairness goes beyond just equality.
It's about recognizing our differences, valuing those differences, and creating a system that supports everyone in reaching their full potential, even if that means providing different levels of support along the way.
Exactly. It's about creating a world where everyone has a seat at the table and a chance to contribute their unique talents and perspectives.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into inclusive education, I'm left with a sense of hope, but also a sense of responsibility.
I feel that too. It's inspiring to see the potential of inclusive education to transform lives and communities, but it's also a call to action.
Right.
We all have a role to play in making this vision a reality.
So to our listener out there, we leave you with this. What will you do to create a more inclusive world? How will you use your voice, your skills, your influence to make a difference?
Keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep pushing for progress.
Because inclusion is a journey worth taking, and it's a journey we take together.
Thanks for visiting with the Deep Dive.